This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Representatives from nearly 200 countries agreed at the COP28 climate summit on Wednesday to begin reducing global consumption of fossil fuels to avert the worst of climate change, a first-of-its-kind deal signaling the eventual end of the oil age. The deal struck in Dubai after 2 weeks of hard-fought negotiations was meant to send a powerful signal to investors and policymakers that the world is united in its desire to break with fossil fuels, something scientists say is the last best hope to stave off climate catastrophe. COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber called the deal historic, but added that its true success would be in its implementation.
The average price of Russian oil delivered to top buyer India in October rose to $84.20 per barrel, way above the $60 price cap set by the Group of Seven Nations in December last year, preliminary Indian government data showed. India paid the highest prices for Russian oil in October since the price cap was imposed, providing a boost to Moscow's revenues despite efforts by Western nations to curb the producer's income and funding for the Ukraine war. India, the world's third biggest oil importer and consumer, has emerged as the biggest buyer of seaborne Russian crude as Western nations cut purchases after Moscow's invasion of Ukraine more than a year ago.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Oil prices extended losses on Wednesday, after falling by more than 3% to 6-month lows on oversupply and demand concerns. Brent crude futures for February fell 33 cents, or 0.45%, to $72.91 a barrel by 0621 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures for January dropped 29 cents, or 0.42%, to $68.32 a barrel. The market stumbled in overnight trade as firmer than expected U.S. inflation readings for November bolstered the view the Federal Reserve was unlikely to cut interest rates early next year, which would weigh on consumption.
Growth of EU solar power installations may slow by 24% in 2024 and 23% in 2025 in the face of weaker wholesale electricity prices and problems getting permits and grid connections, an industry association forecast on Tuesday. The European Union has a target of 600 gigawatts (GW) of solar installations by 2030, needing a significant acceleration in deployment for its transition to non-fossil energy. The 27-member bloc raised the size of its solar fleet by 27% to 263 gigawatts in 2023, Solar Power Europe said in a market outlook. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Gold prices eased on Wednesday to their lowest levels in more than 3 weeks as the dollar edged higher ahead of the U.S. Federal Reserve's interest rate decision and policy outlook later in the day. Spot gold was down 0.2% at $1,975.07 per ounce, as of 0711 GMT. U.S. gold futures also edged 0.2% lower at $1,990.10. The dollar rose 0.2% against its rivals, making gold more expensive for other currency holders. The Fed's Rate-Setting Policy Committee will release its policy statement and interest rate decision at 1900 GMT, followed by Chair Jerome Powell's press conference at 1930 GMT.
Copper prices slid on Wednesday as the dollar gained ahead of an interest rate decision by the U.S. Federal Reserve due later in the day. 3-month copper on the London Metal Exchange slid 0.7% to $8,294.50 per metric ton by 0744 GMT, while the most traded January copper contract on the Shanghai Futures Exchange lost 0.3% to 67,810 yuan per ton. The dollar index climbed following an unexpected rise in U.S. consumer prices in November that added to expectation the Fed will not pivot to rate cuts early next year.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
France is expected to see a sharp fall in the sowing of winter cereals after heavy rain disrupted fieldwork in the European Union's largest grain producer, the Farm Ministry said on Tuesday. However, the area cultivated with winter rapeseed, France's main oilseed crop, was seen holding steady as sowing took place before the wet weather arrived, the ministry said in a crop report. Torrential rain during autumn in France has become a concern for the grain market as it threatens to stop farmers completing planting plans and to reduce yield potential for drilled crops.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.